Scientists ran a simple test. 2 people, the same job, the same task, the same AI. One walks away faster and sharper. The other walks away faster and quietly worse. And here's the part that should bother you. The second person has no idea it happened. There's now hard data on this. Real brain scans, eye tracking, controlled trials with thousands of people, and almost all of it points the same way. So let's actually look properly at what AI is doing to your brain, and the one change that flips it. I'm going to show you the actual research, not vibes. A study at MIT that put EEG caps on people's heads and watched their brains light up, or not. A controlled trial of 1,000 students where AI made their scores go up and then down. A survey of hundreds of workers that found the more you trust AI, the less you think. Real cases, a lawyer, a hospital, a plane, where leaning on the machine went badly wrong. I'll show you why this is invisible from the inside, which is exactly what makes it dangerous. And then the good news, because there is some. A single change. It comes down to order that flips AI from quietly making you duller into genuinely making you sharper. Most people have the order exactly backwards. Stick around for that because it's the whole point. Start with 2 people. Same office, same report to write, both have ChatGPT open. Person A opens the AI first. Prompt, paste, polish, done in 20 minutes. Feels great, looks great. Person B does it backwards. She thinks the problem through first, sketches her own argument, and then brings the AI in to pressure test it and tidy it up. Both hand in good work. On the page, you genuinely cannot tell them apart. The difference only shows up later, when someone asks them to explain it. Person A is fluent right up until you push, why this and not that, and it falls apart. Person B owns every line because she built it. Same tool, same output. Completely different thing happened inside their heads. And the scary part is that person A walks away feeling like the expert. If that sounds made up to prove a point, it isn't. Researchers have watched it happen for real with instruments. In 2024, a team published a study with the almost too perfect title, The Widening Gap. They sat novice programmers down with an AI coding assistant and tracked their actual eye movements as they worked, and they watched the group split in 2. The students who were already strong got more out of the AI. The students who were struggling did something specific. They blew straight past the explanations, grabbed the answer, and finished the task, believing they'd understood it. The researchers had a phrase for that exact state. They called it the illusion of competence, not they failed. Worse, they succeeded and learned nothing and couldn't tell. But the study that should really stop you came out of MIT's Media Lab. They took 54 people, put EEG caps on them to measure brain activity, and split them into 3 groups, all writing essays. One group used ChatGPT, one used a search engine, one used nothing but their own head. Then, over 4 months, they watched the brains. The brain-only group lit up the most. Strong, widely connected networks. The search engine group, less. The ChatGPT group showed the weakest brain connectivity of the 3. The lights basically dimmed. And then comes the detail I can't stop thinking about. After writing an essay, people were asked to quote a single sentence from the thing they had just written minutes earlier. In the ChatGPT group, 83% could not do it, 15 out of 18 people. In the other 2 groups, it was about 1 in 10. They had produced the essay. They did not own a word of it. The researchers gave this a name, and it's the spine of this whole video. They called it cognitive debt. Now, and this matters, this study is a preprint. It hasn't been through full peer review yet, the sample is small, and the lead author has openly warned people not to run AI makes you dumb headlines. So we hold it loosely, but it does not stand alone, as you're about to see. Here's why that phrase is so good. Cognitive debt works exactly like a credit card. But for your thinking. The AI fronts you the answer right now, feels free. But you've skipped the part where your brain does the actual work. The wrestling, the dead ends, the slow effort of encoding something into memory. That struggle isn't a bug in learning. It is the learning. Skip it, and nothing gets stored. The bill arrives later, With interest, when you need to recall it, adapt it, or defend it under pressure, you reach for it, and there's nothing there. The researchers spelled out the long-term cost in plain language: diminished critical thinking, more vulnerability to being manipulated, and less creativity. You didn't learn it, you rented it, and the rent comes due at the worst possible moment. Now, if part of you is thinking, isn't this just the usual panic about every new technology? It's a fair question, and the answer is genuinely no. Because we've watched this exact mechanism for decades, long before AI. Psychologists even have a name for it: cognitive offloading, handing a mental task to an external tool to save effort. Take your phone. A famous study in the journal Science found that when people know a fact is saved somewhere they can look it up, they remember the fact itself worse. They remember where to find it better. The information moves out of your head and into the device. Take GPS. Researchers tracking 50 drivers found that the more heavily people relied on turn-by-turn navigation, the worse their own sense of direction became. And over 3 years, the heaviest users showed a steeper decline in the brain's spatial memory. And here's the flip side: the proof it runs both ways. London taxi drivers who memorize that impossible tangle of streets have a measurably enlarged region of the hippocampus, and the longer they've driven, the bigger it is. Effort physically builds the brain. Offloading lets it fade. That's the rule, simply. The brain strengthens what you use and lets go of what you don't. None of this means your neurons get deleted when you open ChatGPT. That's not how it works. It means a skill you stop exercising quietly gets weaker. And honestly, this worry is ancient. 2,500 years ago in Plato, Socrates warned that writing itself would ruin human memory, that people would stop remembering from the inside and just trust the marks on the page. He had a point. The irony is we only know he said it because someone wrote it down. But correlation isn't proof. Maybe people with worse memories just use GPS more. A good skeptic should push back here, so let's bring in the strongest evidence we have: an actual randomized controlled trial published in a leading science journal. Researchers took around 1,000 high school students and had them practice math. Some got a plain ChatGPT-style assistant. Some got a version with guardrails, a tutor that gives hints instead of answers. And some got nothing but a textbook. While the students had the AI, the results looked incredible. The plain AI group scored 48% higher on their practice problems. 48%. This is the dream, right? Then the researchers took the AI away and gave everyone a normal exam, just them and the paper. And the plain AI group didn't just lose their lead. They scored about 17% worse than the students who'd never had AI at all. They hadn't been learning. They'd been leaning. The crutch felt like a superpower right up until it was removed. And here's the hopeful twist hiding in the same study. The group with the guardrail tutor, hints, not answers, showed no such drop. Same technology. The only thing that changed was how it was allowed to help. Hold on to that because it's the key to the whole back half of this video. So that's students. What about grown professionals, people who should know better? Microsoft Research and Carnegie Mellon surveyed 319 knowledge workers about nearly 1,000 real tasks they'd done with AI. The pattern they found is almost poetic. The more a person trusted the AI, the less critical thinking they did. And flip it around. The more confidence someone had in their own skill, the more they actually scrutinized what the AI gave them, at the cost of more effort. Read those two together, and you get the trap in one sentence. People stopped checking the AI exactly when they felt sure of it, which is precisely the moment a confident wrong answer slips through. The researchers were careful here, and so will I. This is what workers reported about their own effort, not a brain measurement. But it lines up with everything else, and it points somewhere uncomfortable. As we offload the thinking, our job quietly changes from doing the work to checking the machine's work, which only works if we're still sharp enough to catch it when it's wrong. And before you tell yourself, that's other people, I'd catch it. The research is brutally clear that you probably wouldn't. There's a well-documented phenomenon called automation bias. Our tendency to overtrust an automated system and wave its answer through, even when we have everything we need to know it's wrong. decades of human factors research found something humbling. This bias shows up in beginners and experts alike, and it can't simply be trained away. Here's a chilling example. Researchers showed radiologists mammograms with AI assistance, but they secretly fed some of them the wrong AI suggestion. When the AI was confidently wrong, accuracy collapsed across the board. Even the most experienced radiologists, people who read these images for a living, dropped to around 45%. A confident machine doesn't just save you effort, it can quietly overwrite your own judgment, and you won't feel it happen. Up to now, this might feel academic. It isn't. The same effect is already showing up where the stakes are life and death. In 2025, a study in The Lancet looked at experienced doctors performing colonoscopies, the procedure that catches bowel cancer early. These clinics had started using AI to help spot polyps. The researchers measured how well the doctors did on their own without the AI before and after they'd gotten used to it. Their unaided detection rate dropped from 28% down to 22%. After leaning on the AI, the doctors had quietly gotten worse at the thing they were trained to do. The authors believe it's the first hard evidence of AI de-skilling on a real medical task. Now hold this loosely too. It's an observational study, not a controlled trial. But the pattern should feel familiar by now, and aviation has been living this for years. Pilots call the over-reliance children of the magenta line, following the automated flight path so completely that the manual skill withers. In 2009, Air France Flight 447 fell out of the sky over the Atlantic, killing all 228 people on board, not because of a storm or a broken engine, but because when the autopilot handed control back during a simple sensor glitch, the crew never recognized that the plane had stalled and didn't recover it. The machine flew beautifully right up until the moment it needed a human who'd kept their edge. The pattern is always the same. The tool is brilliant until it isn't, and then everything depends on the skill you let go. Then there's the most modern failure of all, trusting fluent AI output you never checked. In 2023, 2 New York lawyers filed a legal brief citing 6 court cases. Quotes, case numbers, the works. Every single one was fake. ChatGPT had invented them, and here's the kicker that captures this entire video. When the lawyer got nervous and asked ChatGPT whether the cases were real, the AI confidently assured him they were, that he could find them on Westlaw and LexisNexis. He believed it. The judge fined them $5,000, and their names became a cautionary tale. Or take Air Canada, whose website chatbot invented a refund policy that didn't exist, promised it to a grieving customer, and then the airline tried to argue in court that the chatbot was a separate entity responsible for its own words. The tribunal said no, you own what your machine tells people, and made them pay. Even GPS has a body count. In 2022, a North Carolina man followed his navigation across a bridge that had collapsed 9 years earlier in the dark and died. The through line in every one of these is identical, a confident, fluent answer, trusted because it sounded right and never verified against reality. That instinct, it sounds right, so it is right, is exactly the instinct AI is training into all of us, millions of times a day. And this isn't a fringe habit for a few power users. It's becoming the default way an entire generation thinks. As of early 2026, more than half of American teenagers, 54%, say they use AI chatbots to help with schoolwork. The narrow slice using ChatGPT specifically for homework doubled in a single year. In the UK, a survey of university students found 92% now use AI tools, and 88% use them on actual assessments. 1 in 5 American workers now use AI on the job and climbing. So when we talk about cognitive debt, we are not talking about a lab curiosity. We're talking about hundreds of millions of people quietly outsourcing the exact mental effort that used to build them. Every single day, starting younger every year. And here's a twist that makes the whole thing stickier. These systems aren't neutral. They're trained in part to make you feel good, to keep you coming back. The industry even has a word for when it goes too far: sycophancy. This isn't a conspiracy theory, it comes from the companies themselves. In April 2025, OpenAI rolled out a ChatGPT update and had to roll it back within days, admitting it had become, their words, overly supportive but disingenuous. too eager to flatter and agree. Anthropic, another major lab, published research showing that AI assistants across the board tend towards sycophancy, and, this is the unsettling part, that both humans and the AI systems used to train them will often prefer a convincing, agreeable answer over a correct one. Sit with that. The machine is partly optimized to tell you what you want to hear and to sound right while doing it, which is the precise blind spot we just spent 10 minutes building. A confident answer that feels true is the hardest kind to question. And now there's a multi-billion-dollar industry making them smoother every month. And it's not just our thinking we're handing over you. For a growing number of people, it's becoming emotional. A study from OpenAI and MIT looking at over 4 million conversations plus a month-long trial found something sobering. The heaviest daily users of ChatGPT reported more loneliness and emotional dependence, not less. And the more someone used it for personal, emotional conversation, the lonelier they tended to be. The New York Times has documented cases, and I'll be careful here, these are reported individual stories, not a clinical study, of vulnerable people spiraling into delusion during long chatbot conversations, the AI cheerfully affirming whatever they brought to it. The same agreeableness that makes it a comfortable companion is what makes it a dangerous mirror. It rarely pushes back. And a mind that's never pushed back on is a mind that slowly stops pushing at all. So pull it together, and you can see why almost nobody notices this happening to them. Every single force points the same way, and none of them set off an alarm. The output always looks great. That's the AI's entire job. You can't feel your own brain disengaging. There's no ache, no warning light, no soreness the next day. The fluency you feel isn't yours, it's borrowed, and a borrowed answer that works feels absolutely identical from the inside to actually knowing something. The machine is tuned to flatter you, and you're wired to trust a confident voice. There is no moment where it feels like loss. It never feels like getting worse. It feels like getting faster. And that, not robots, not job losses, is the quiet thing AI is doing to your brain. It's making the most important muscle you have feel optional. Okay, deep breath, because here is the good news, and it's real, and it's sitting right there in the same research. This is not never use AI. Watch what happens when you change one thing. Go back to that MIT brain scan study because they ran a fourth round that's easy to miss. They took the people who'd been leaning on ChatGPT the whole time and made them write with just their own head. And they took the people who'd been working from their own head and finally gave them ChatGPT. The result was night and day. The ones who'd built the habit of thinking first kept their brains switched on, even with AI in hand, strong recall, re-engaged networks. The ones who'd gone AI first the whole time stayed switched off. Only 1 of 9 could even quote what they'd written. Same people, same tool, opposite outcome, and the only variable that changed was order. AI used after your own thinking is a power tool. It sharpens what's already there. AI used before your own thinking is a loan. It does the work, and you pay later. That's it. That's the whole secret. And almost everyone, almost all the time, uses it as a loan. And when you get the order right, AI doesn't just stop hurting you, it can genuinely make you sharper. Remember that controlled trial where unrestricted AI made students worse? The guardrailed version, the one that gave hints instead of answers, did no harm at all. And a separate randomized study at Harvard went further. They built an AI physics tutor deliberately engineered to teach, not to answer, told to be brief, to give one step at a time, to never hand over the full solution, and to make students try it themselves first. Students learning with that tutor learned more than twice as much, in less time, than students in a normal active learning class, and felt more engaged doing it. Same underlying technology that's racking up cognitive debt everywhere else. The difference was entirely in the design and the direction of effort. And notice, the AI labs themselves now ship study modes and learning modes that refuse to just give the answer and ask you guiding questions instead, which is a quiet admission that the default behavior, the instant answer machine, was the problem all along. So here's how you actually use AI without quietly hollowing yourself out. 6 rules, every one of them backed by the research we just walked through. 1. Think first, AI second. Take your own swing at the problem before you prompt, make the decision, sketch the skeleton, write the rough draft. There's a 50-year-old finding called the generation effect. The answer you produce yourself sticks far better than the answer you read. So generate, then let AI refine. 2. Retrieve before you look it up. When you want to know something, try to pull it from memory first, then check with AI. In one classic study, students who tested themselves remembered 61% a week later, versus 40% for students who just reread the material, even though rereading felt more productive. The struggle to recall is what builds the memory. 3, and this is the cleanest test there is from a Microsoft researcher. Anything you'd ask an AI to write, you should be able to write yourself. Use it freely where you're already strong. Be careful exactly where you're weak, because that's where the debt hides, disguised as help. 4, make AI defend, not decide. Don't ask it for the conclusion. Ask it to critique your draft, argue the opposite side, find the hole in your logic, quiz you, turn it from an oracle into a sparring partner. 5, keep some things hard on purpose. Researchers call them desirable difficulties. The friction you're tempted to automate away is often the exact thing doing the work. Don't outsource the struggle that's building you. And 6, the more you trust it, the harder you check it. Treat that warm feeling of "this looks right" as your cue to verify against a real source, not as permission to stop. Those 6 rules are the entire difference between AI that augments you and AI that quietly replaces you. If you want them on one page with every study cited so you can check me yourself, I'll tell you how at the end. Now let me argue against myself for a second, because the honest version of this matters more than the scary one. None of this means feel guilty every time you open ChatGPT. If the goal is just doing boilerplate, a format you've written 100 times, a language you'll never need to speak, something you genuinely don't care to keep in your head, then offload it, gladly. That is exactly what the tool is for, and refusing to use it is its own kind of foolishness. Cognitive debt only matters where you'd actually want to keep the skill. And remember, the strongest single study we looked at, the brain scan one, is still a small preprint. Suggestive, not the final word. The whole game isn't avoiding AI. It's being the one who decides deliberately which things are worth keeping in your own head, instead of letting the machine quietly make that call for you by default, forever. If you made it all the way here, genuinely welcome. This is the AI Files, where every episode pulls back the curtain on what these tools are actually doing underneath the magic. If that's your kind of thing, subscribe. I promise you'll never use AI quite the same way again. Our last episode was about the hidden humans secretly running your AI, the people you never see behind every answer. It's right there on screen, and it pairs with this one perfectly. And if you want the one-page field guide, all 6 rules plus every single study we cited so you can fact-check me yourself, comment the word brain and I'll send it your way. Until next time, think first, let the machine go second, and I'll see you in the next